I'm live. I'd like to know how the story goes on. We turn to Elysium, chapter 11, entitled Roman Daughter. This is the life of Lucina, 2nd century BC, and it is a life of Joan Grant, who was a writer of her own far memories. Here she is Lucina, who lived on Elysium and is now in Rome. I lay on a couch watching my new, beautiful clothes being unpacked by Lydia, the slave whom Euripides had brought for me in Rome. I was supposed to be resting after my journey. "You must be quite exhausted," Julia had said. "I have promised your brother that you shall both have chance to relax. You will find we live very simply when we escape to Elysium." Did I look tired? Surely not. Did I look tired? Surely not. Or was it considered patrician to find a journey in easy stages by litter something of an ordeal? I'd intended to be discovered by Nigellus in the garden, perhaps with a background of white roses, or where a solitary cypress could provide the vertical line to point my Greek draperies. Now I was condemned to stay in my room until the rest of the party collected on the terrace before the evening meal. I should have to meet Nigellus in public, with no chance to warn him of my presence in his house. Julia had said, "My husband hoped to be here to welcome you, but he has been detained. The Senate is greedy of his time. He will be back tonight, or tomorrow at the latest." She had thrown an arch glance at Euripides. "Nigellus is a great admirer of your brother's plays, and we are so glad that you came here with him." I was far too excited to rest. Could I explore the garden, or would it be unwise? I told Lydia to return later, and when the door closed behind her, I opened the shutters. My room was on the west of the house. The garden sloped steeply to the beach. Marble statues were lavishly displayed among the flowering bushes with which the terraced ground was planted. There was a stone pergola covered with roses, so I had not been too optimistic in my setting. "Do you like it now you are here?" I turned to see Euripides, who had come in through a door concealed by a curtain which I had not noticed before. "I'm in the next room. Where's Lydia?" I sent her away. It's rather tiresome having a maid who doesn't know who I really am. But you were quite right not to bring any of our own. "Nervous?" "No," I said, and then added, "Of course I am. One moment I'm enormously happy, and then I feel rather silly. Wouldn't it be awful if Nigellus isn't pleased to see me, if he thinks I shall be only a complication?" "Wondering already if you will find him disappointing?" No, I don't think I am. Julia is no fool. She could be a formidable opponent. I have been talking to her. I think she is already unsure whether it was clever to invite you. She asked me whether your marriage had been arranged yet, and could not quite conceal that she regretted it hadn't. She said you might find Nigellus a little dull, as he was so much older. He is rather old for you, Lucina. He looked at me without the usual laughter lurking behind his eyes. "Are you sure you are not making a mistake? There are plenty of other lovers available, if that's all you want." I sat down on the edge of the over-luxurious bed and tried to sound casual. "I have come here because I was bored and needed a holiday. I may leave here and go back to Salonius, or I may decide to go to Athens. If your invitation still holds good. I may take a lover, or I may not. It depends on whether I decide it is an experience I ought to have before I get too old." "But why choose a Roman?" "Because any of the Greeks I have met would be too busy thinking about themselves to think enough about me. Women mean nothing in Greece, because the men are so sure of their masculine superiority that they don't even try to please their wives, except in a patronizing kind of way, and I won't be patronized. We never patronized you, Lucina, only because I never gave you the chance. I had to show that I was as good as a man as any of you, and then you accepted me as an equal. With a Roman, I can be a woman, and automatically the superior. He will have my sympathy, he said brusquely. You will soon get tired of an obedient lover, and I doubt if you will have the kindness to conceal your disappointment. He went out of the room, slamming the door behind him. So, Euripides also thought I should be a failure as a woman. I picked up a mirror and studied my face carefully. Nobody believed a man could make me forget everything else. Why should I go on being lonely just because it was convenient to other people for me to be clever? I was young and I wanted to be happy. I wanted a husband and a child and a house, all the ordinary things. And I'm quite clever and quite beautiful, enough to get them. I said this aloud, which made me feel foolish. Surely I had not become so weak that I had to ask myself for reassurance. When I reached the terrace, I knew Nigellus had not arrived, for I could see the road from my window. I found Euripides talking to Flavia, the daughter, and a woman called Claudia, who was a distant relation of Julia's. I liked Flavia. She was dark with a thin, intense face, and she talked with surprising intelligence of one of her race and class. Julia joined us, and immediately Claudia became the sycophant, anxious to make it clear she had only offered us wine because the hostess had not yet arrived. I felt sorry for Claudia, nearly 30 and unmarried, living in other people's houses and watching her vitality slowly eaten away by the acid of patronage. I knew her even before we had exchanged a few trivial remarks. I had seen too many of her type as patients not to recognize it, and known how impossible it was to cure them. What use would it have been to say, break away from your environment, get a house of your own, even if it is a hovel, adopt a child if you're too old to bear one, find a man, almost any man, who will make you feel important to him. They were too bound by convention to break free, too conscious of their background to risk changing it, too artificial to get a real friend, or even a lover. I shivered. In Claudia I saw something that might become an echo of myself if I became as bound to Salonius and a temple ritual as she was to Julia. You're cold, said Julia. The sea air is treacherous until you're used to it. I had to let her send for my cloak. She watched me put it on, secure that she was the thoughtful hostess, to whom no small discomfort of a guest could pass unremedied. I found it difficult to make convincing conversation during the meal, which as usual stretched far beyond the time which eating should occupy. At any moment Nigellus might come into the room. The entrance courtyard was on the far side of the house, and I would not hear his arrival. I had spent hours considering our meeting. What a tragedy if it took place when my mouth was full. We talked of interminable trivialities while the moon rose and shone high through the arched windows. I began to feel sleepy and to regret that I had not taken the opportunity to rest during the late afternoon. I felt a trickle of sweat run down my forehead. It was no comfort that Julia was also wilting in the heat. It would be better to go to bed, even if I could not sleep, than to continue in this cloud of ambiguity. I stifled a small, deliberate yawn. Immediately Julia said it was time to go to bed, and for once it was easy to agree with her. I left my door propped open with a sandal in case I could hear Nigellus arrive. Later I wished that I had been less vulnerable to impatience. I had heard a man's voice and a woman answering. Against my better judgment I crept across the hall, which divided our wing of the house from the owner's apartments. I saw shadows on the pink wall of the central room. Nigellus talking to his wife, while she cut slices of cold meat and poured something out of a jug, an ordinary domestic scene which I watched and felt ashamed. She told me Euripides was here, but did not even bother to mention me. She told him Euripides was here, but did not even bother to mention me. Then she talked of household matters. A slave had broken one of the best dishes. The young vines on the south terrace were colouring well. Flavia had had a sore throat, but was now cured. Claudia had been a little tiresome. Poor woman, it must be so difficult for her to be dependent on us for everything, she added with contempt. I saw Nigella stretch and heard him say he was tired. He put his arm round Julia and then kissed her on the forehead. Their shadows grew large on the wall before vanishing towards their own rooms. I went back to bed and took some of the poppy drink, which was easier than staying awake, much easier than trying not to think of the future. I woke early and went into the garden, hoping the morning freshness would clear my headache. I thought Nigella's would be late getting up. He was probably sufficiently weary of Julia's guests not to see more of them than necessary. 3 slaves were watering a bed of marigolds. They stared at me as I passed, no doubt surprised that any member of the household should be out so early. I walked towards the stables and watched one of the horses being groomed, and 2 boys bringing in fresh bales of straw. A kitchen girl came out with a bucket of swill. She spilled some when she saw me, and then ran back to the house, leaving a greasy trail across the cobbles. I went back towards the terrace, and then down through the small wood which shielded the side of the house from the sea winds. I found Nigella's writing at a stone table in a secluded pavilion. He stared at me without speaking, as though I would vanish if he broke the spell. "Have you forgotten me?" I said. He got slowly to his feet, the stylus rolling across the worn stone and falling with a brittle sound to the tiles. "Lucina," he said, "Lucina." I felt suddenly maternal, as though he were a child I must reassure. "It's not a dream, Nigella's. It was impossible for us never to see each other again, so I followed you. Here, are you glad?" He looked very young when he smiled. "I have dreamt about this, but I always wake up when I try to take you in my arms." "I'm a very solid dream. Are you not brave enough to dare reality?" It was much easier to feel than to think, so easy to be only a woman. "You are very beautiful, Lucina, so much more dear even than I remembered." I could feel his heart beating, and for the first time I knew why women find it wise to forget wisdom. He looked down at me, and I was glad he was tall. "Lucina, I was a fool to think we could say goodbye to each other." I do not know how long it was before he suddenly said, "Does Julia know you are here?" It was like throwing a stone into a pool which had reflected a scene too bright for ordinary seeing. Ripples spread out, and the dark weeds showed beneath the surface. "Yes," I said, "Julia asked me to come, as the sister of Euripides. She has no idea that I have any link with the sister of Narcissus." He did not bother to inquire further. He was satisfied that Julia approved, that he need not feel guilty. I had learned how to rescue people from petty tyrants. Could I be sure that I wanted to be rescued from Julia? That he wanted to be rescued from Julia? It is difficult to give a clear picture of Julia, for my view of her underwent so many rapid changes. At first I felt sorry for her, the middle-aged woman whose husband preferred me. But that was before I talked with Flavia. "You don't know, Mother," said Flavia. "It is no use your telling me to be more sympathetic when she tries to find out what I really feel. I used to want her. I used to be glad when she came to see me after I had gone to bed and had cozy conversation. It was only her way of finding out if I was interested in any of the suitable young men she asked to the house, or the unsuitable ones that Marcus used to bring home. I was silly enough to tell her that I thought I might be falling in love with a centurion. He was a patrician, but his family weren't rich or important. He was sent abroad within a few days. She pretended to be very sorry for me when I heard he had died of fever. I almost believed her, and then I suddenly realized she had arranged it all. She probably chose the place where he was sent because she knew it was unhealthy. We were alone on the beach, and Flavia was sitting on a flat rock, her hands linked around her knees, her voice expressionless. because she dared not allow emotion to show. It is unpleasant to discover that your mother is almost a murderess, and that you have been blind enough to deliver into her power the man who would have been your husband. She couldn't have known he was going to die, I said. It is natural for a mother to interfere in her daughter's future. She cannot be expected to realize it is not really her business. You underrate her. She's quite ruthless when anyone tries to stop her plans. Flavia laughed, a hard, brittle sound. At least I can embarrass her by refusing to marry. It is amusing to see how she dislikes the sympathy she gets for having an unmarried daughter, and it will be even more tiresome when she can't pretend it is only because no one sufficiently important has been selected. She tried to make me accept a most suitable person last year. I only avoided it by saying I would kill myself if she went any further with the marriage contract. She had to stop then, because she was afraid of the scandal. She couldn't afford to have both her children disgraced. Marcus isn't much of a credit to her, now that he never comes here and is living with one of the charioteers and drives in the circus. I loved Marcus, and so did father, so she took him away from us. I thought Marcus quarrelled with his father over a Greek. You mean Narcissus? Oh, he wasn't the real cause. He was only something mother could produce to make father angry enough to join in the row. If Marcus hadn't seen through mother, he wouldn't have disliked women. All the girls she produced for him were potential Julias, or else they were so spineless that we both despised them. You can be sorry for someone you despise, but you can't love her. Yet your father has lived with Julia for over 20 years. Is he such a bad judge of character? Her face softened. Father? She has never let him forget that by marrying him they both lost the chance of falling in love. She makes it clear that she has always tried to make it up to him in other ways. The perfect hostess, the house so well run, a constant devotion to his career, and of course she is so hideously clever when he gets interested in anyone else. So there have been other women? Not many. She always asks them here until they feel so guilty at deceiving dear Julia that they go away, or else she arranges that they make fools of themselves. Father is not tolerant of fools. Was Flavia warning me? I had nearly asked her if she knew about Nigellus and me, and then I thought it might be kinder to leave her in ignorance. If she were ignorant. There was a long pause, as if she were waiting for me to speak. Then she said, Claudia is a good example of what mother can do when she tries. I think father was a little in love with her. Anyway, he wasn't at all pleased when he found she had been asked to stay here. She's a widow, you know. Her husband fell on his sword because he lost a battle, and she was left very poor. Julia was so kind to her. She gave her lots of clothes and kept on telling her she must eat more because she was so thin and that her looks were going. Of course, the clothes were all in the most unbecoming colours, and being told she was faded took away all her self-confidence. She thinks mother is wonderful and is always trying to justify her position here. If she ever loved father, she doesn't now. She feels guilty every time she looks at him. He hates having her in the house, but whenever he suggests that she would be happier elsewhere, mother smiles and says, But dear, you used to be so fond of her. We mustn't be unkind just because you have discovered she is a little dull. She leaves them alone together very obviously because she knows they have nothing to say to each other. But it's a great asset to mother when she is telling other women how stupid it is to be jealous. It was just the same when I was small. She used to give me expensive toys I didn't want so that I could bring them down when I was summoned from the nursery, and everyone could see how generous and thoughtful she was. That was when she was in what Marcus and I called the devoted young mother period. We were taken in by it until we discovered she never bothered to be fond of us, to be fond to us without a suitable audience. Why'd you stay here? If you could have a house of your own, wouldn't you be much happier? Already in my mind I'd arranged for Nigellus to make his daughter independent. At least I could rescue her. I have money of my own. It was left to me by an aunt, the only person really kind to us when we were children. But I was not going to let Mother drive me away. I'm the only thing Father has got left. It's a pity I have decided not to marry. I should like to have had a child. It would be so easy to know what it wanted. Just the exact opposite to everything I was given. Why don't you persuade your father to take you to live with him in Rome? You know he doesn't love Julia, but he loves you. Julia would never let him go. You see, he is her career. She arranged for him to be elected to the Senate. Half the things he says there are her ideas. She's much stronger than he is, and inside himself he knows it. He likes being a senator, and he knows she would break him if he left her. She is much more clever than you realize, Lucina. Everyone thinks she is so dependable, so sane. If he was disobedient, she would spread careful little stories that his mind was going, that for a long while she had been anxious about him. Overwork, overstrain, tell on the strongest in the end, and dear Nigellus would never spare himself. Everything said in the strictest confidence, knowing that it would get to the right quarters before the end of the day. But if he had the courage to make an open break with her, divide their friends into two camps, you mean? She would win, and Father could not bear to be unpopular. It is the one thing which compensates him for not being allowed any real friends. But if he won't, wouldn't it be worth the risk? He wouldn't be happy long unless the dead find the tomb amusing. Why should he die? She looked at me in frank astonishment. I keep forgetting you're a foreigner. He would die because Mother would arrange it. Poison, I expect. It's not difficult to have someone poisoned if you really make up your mind it is worth doing. Dear Lucina, you look shocked. You are so understanding and then so naive that I feel years older than you. She looked at me very straightly and then impulsively kissed me on the cheek. I love your being here, and so does Father, but you must not underrate Julia. It might be healthier for you to go back to Athens. Rome is too close. I'll finish this here for now.